Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the world premiere of the new film by Kasi Lemmons, Harriet. My name is Cameron Bailey. I'm the artistic director and the co-head here at TIFF. I want to thank you all for coming out this evening. We always like to begin by taking a moment to reflect on where we are. This is the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat First Nation. These native indigenous nations have been on this land for, in some cases, thousands of years, and we're grateful to be here, to be sharing this land, and to be working in this community. We want to remind you that this film is eligible for our most important prize. That is the Grolsch People's Choice Award, and that's the award that you decide. So we invite you to vote. You can go online to tiff.net/vote and vote for your favorite films there. We want to thank Universal Studios Canada and Focus Features for providing us with this film. They have been great partners of ours for many, many years. And it is such a pleasure to have Kasi back with a new film here in Toronto. Her award-winning debut feature, Eve's Bayou, premiered at the Toronto Film Festival in 1997. It's a terrific film. We recently hosted an anniversary screening of that film at TIFF Bell Lightbox, and Kasi was kind enough to attend that and to talk about making that film. The film was recently added to the Library of Congress's National Film Registry, so it will be around for generations to come, and I hope that's also the case for her new film, Harriet. Kasi's other directorial credits include the features The Caveman's Valentine in 2001, Talk to Me in 2007, and Black Nativity in 2013. You know, after we watched Harriet several weeks ago and we invited the film, it occurred to me that there are so many films about other figures in American history. There are 30 feature films, over 30 feature films about General George Custer, for instance, who fought against indigenous peoples and nations in the US and died at Little Bighorn. But how many films have you seen about Harriet Tubman? This is the first. That is just one of the reasons that this film is special. The filmmaking is the other reason, just the craft of this film, the performances, and just a groundbreaking performance by Cynthia Erivo in the lead role as Harriet Tubman. I mentioned Custer and all those movies, those westerns that many of us grew up on, because there's a context for this film that you're about to watch. My family was taken into slavery in West Africa and forced to work in Barbados for generations. But that's pretty much all I know about that part of my family's story. We don't have our stories. And I'm grateful to Kasi Lemmons and to everyone who contributed to making Harriet for giving us this story. It's what I hope is only the beginning of many, many more. I'm very happy that Kasi's come to introduce the film to you this evening. Please join me in welcoming the director of Harriet, Kasi Lemmons.
Hello. We are so excited to be here at TIFF 2019 to be showing this film, the first theatrical feature on Harriet Tubman. Thank you so much, Cameron. It means so much to me to be here 22 years later to show this film. Look, this was a challenging film to get made. It was challenging on many different levels, but it's the only film that I've made where every single person in the cast and crew was there with a single purpose. And if you asked any one of them on any day when we're in the woods, in the rain, at night, slogging through the mud, if you asked them why we were doing it, they would answer, we're doing it for Harriet. We're doing it to bring her extraordinary story to an audience. I had the great good fortune to spend the last 2.5 years with somebody who became my friend, who died over 100 years ago. Somebody who inspired me greatly and has a message for our time. And I've had some time to think about this. What is the message that I think that she's bringing and that she wants us to realize? And it has to do with what a person can accomplish with the sheer force of their will when their courage outweighs their fear. And I think that's really important right now. When your courage outweighs your fear and you have force of will, you can accomplish anything. I want to introduce you to some of the people behind the film. It took a force of will to get the movie made, and our producers never gave up. So please welcome Deborah Martin Chase, who had this script for years and didn't give up and stayed with it. Come on, Deborah. Deborah produced this movie with Daniela Toplin-Lumberg, her partner in this, and they stuck with it, and they finally called me, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful.
You did an amazing job, and
that you invited me on this journey. I'm so grateful. And Deborah and Danielle and I want to thank Focus Features for making the film with us. And give so much support along the way, which the film needed. We really appreciate it. And now we want to introduce you to some of the cast. We'll be around to answer some questions after the film. Here they are: Henry Hunter Hall. Omar Dorsey. Vondi Curtis Hall. There he goes. Jennifer Nettles. Woo! Zachary Moma. Joe Alwyn. Come this way. Leslie Odom Jr. And somebody who is very, very, very close to my heart, our star, our Harriet, the beautiful, the incomparable Cynthia Erivo. We hope you enjoy the film. Enjoy Harriet. Thank you.
Please join me in welcoming the star of Harriet, Cynthia Erivo. Leslie Odom Jr. Joe Alwyn. Jennifer Nettles. Hunter Hall. And the director, Kasi Lemmons. Oh, Vondi Curtis Hall as well. Sorry, brother. And Kasi Lemmons. Congratulations on bringing Harriet Tubman to the big screen at last, all of you.
Thank you.
Kasi, I'll start with you. Many Americans and Canadians will know the story of Harriet Tubman. Of course, it's a story that crosses the border between our two countries, but this is the first feature film. Let's get this question out of the way. Why?
Well, I mean, to me, it was a little bit of a no-brainer. I mean, this is one of our real hero stories, a real-life superhero story with a woman, a black woman in the lead. This is one of the great people that's lived, you know? And we had a sense of her from photographs, the photographs that we would see when we were taught her in schools is an old woman in a chair. And yet when she was doing most of her work, she was a young woman. And so we wanted to show this young woman in action. And it's kind of, it's a real life action film.
It really does have that character of an action movie at some points. There's some sequences that are full of that tension and that suspense. Cynthia, in building the character of Harriet Tubman based on the screenplay, on Kasy's direction and all of the historical work, what were the most important elements for you? Was it the physicality? Was it her faith? What did you draw on?
A combination of things, really. Oh, gosh. For me, the most important thing that I felt was really apparent in the script was her womanhood. We don't get to see the fact that she was loved and that she loved. And I wanted that to be the thing that I started from, because it meant that we saw a fully realized woman who happened to have incredible ability, as opposed to a superhero who had incredible ability but wasn't human to us. She had incredible humanity, and that's what I wanted to come out first. The ability was something I worked on, for sure. And it was something that was complemented by who she was first. Yeah.
Kasi, I want to ask you the question about making the film on set, but also a question for the actors, because I can imagine that making a movie about this particular history and just given the violence of slavery, that it must have been difficult to do. You've got to prepare your actors and your crew for just what they're going to have to go through and do to each other in a way. How did you prepare them? And I'm curious to know from the actors, how did you react to the experience of making the film?
Well, I think that first of all, you have to hire the right actors. Omar, are you still here? Omar. Like Omar Dorsey, who plays this incredibly terrible person, and Joe Alwyn and Jennifer, but are wonderful people. And then to create a really safe environment where we can talk about these things and explore it and really check in with each other, you know, but this is what we're doing. So not to shy away from that, but really to create an environment where it's okay and we can trust each other, that we are, that something is being directed and performed, you know, but that's not us. That's we're trying to create a greater understanding of it.
Can I ask the actors, Joe, you've got the microphone. Do you want to start? What was it like for you on set? You know, you've got to do some pretty nefarious things.
Yeah, he's a pretty deplorable person, as is his mother. And we've been talking about it the last couple of days. Obviously, you know, it's tricky to find any kind of commonality with these people and what they stand for and what they believe in and what they did. And I guess from our point of view, you try and latch into some kind of humanity in there if you can try and find it, because that's the only way you're going to be able to connect. And I suppose, from my point of view with Gideon, he's somewhere buried deep down in him is some kind of tangled mess of confusion for what he feels for Harriet. And whether that's love or whatever it is, it's so twisted and deep. I don't think he even knows. I don't think there's a language that he has or that is allowed to express that. But it's masked by being in a world where that's never going to be able to express itself. But it fuels this obsessive pursuit, definitely.
And Leslie, Hunter, Vondi, what did you bring to set to kind of get you in the right frame of mind to tell this story?
I brought my research, my study about William Still. He, there's that, even we live in the information age, but there's still so many people who don't seek out the information, right? We had that famous sort of, moment that happened a year ago where somebody said, talking about slavery, sounds like a choice, like why? They could have just run, sounds like a choice. And, in my research, I knew that was ridiculous when I heard it, but, in my research of William Still, who I knew about, I grew up in Philadelphia, but what I didn't know is that William Still was raised by 2 escaped slaves himself, never spent a day in chattel slavery ever. He was born in New Jersey, but his mother escaped slavery with her 4 children, tried to escape twice, and was caught and brought back. She had to make the impossible decision on her 3rd escape attempt to leave her 2 sons behind and just escape with her 2 daughters. Because she said, I think, I want to make it this time, and I feel like the boys would have a better chance on their own than the girls would. And so, you talk about, that kind of deeper understanding of what, of chattel slavery and what drove these people to do the things that they did, Harriet, William, what drove them to have the courage that they had. That's what I tried to bring to the set.
Thank you. And Jennifer?
I think as Joe so very eloquently put it, there is not a whole lot redeemable for the characters that we played, but the attempt to try and bring humanity in such a way. I think Eliza, specifically, she was a desperate woman at the time she lived. She couldn't read. Women had no agency. She was a widow. What do you do when you're backed against the corner? But really, what I wanted to bring to this, and Kasi has touched on this before, is keeping in mind the bigger picture, no pun intended, but keeping in mind Harriet, really, and the old saying that says, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. And Harriet was a fantastically bright light, and so I hoped and wanted to bring the darkest shadow that this character needed in order to, to really let that light shine even more brightly.
Thank you. Vondi and Hunter?
For me, playing Reverend Green was great in that I had the opportunity to do the research for that, as Leslie was speaking of, and find that he was instrumental in saving the lives of so many people through his efforts. And ultimately, as cunning in many ways as Harriet, and ended up being sentenced to 10 years in prison for having a copy of Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was deemed to be abolitionist propaganda. And so it was great to dive into this and to work with Kasi and be directed by her and try and serve her vision. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Please, Hunter, go ahead.
Okay. Well, so Walter's really interesting because he's a mercenary. He's kind of like the artful dodger of the whole thing. And me and Kasi talked a lot about survival and that he's neither free nor a slave. And so when you first meet him, you don't know, he doesn't know when his last meal was or when his next meal is going to come. He really just sells his services, and that doesn't always work out. So, I just think he's different because he's in between. He sells his people out. There's no moral compass, really. He's just trying to survive. until he till he sees a miracle, and his faith is renewed, not in, God or anything, but just in this woman, this miracle that he's seeing in front of him. And so he changes sides, really, for the better. Thank God. Thank you for taking me.
I want to open it up to you and your questions in just one moment, but before I do that, Kasi, I just want to ask you what your hopes are for the film. It is the first feature film about Harriet Tubman. We know there's a campaign to put Harriet Tubman's face on the $20 US bill. Including that or beyond that, what do you hope this film achieves?
Well, like I was speaking of, just the inspiration and empowering a new generation with this story, and to see what really can be accomplished. And really to get people to dive deeper into Harriet, Google, look her up, read books, and really to come to understand this story that we've had such a superficial understanding of who she was, and it's a very big story. We could only cover a small fraction of it. And so to really, find these people, find William Still, read The Underground Railroad, William Still's wonderful book that captures all these lives, and really look into Harriet and look into Reverend Green, and this is our history, and it's a rich and wonderful history, and we shouldn't be afraid of it. We should embrace it, because it's how we got here, and it's made us who we are, and so that's what I hope as well.
Thank you. All right. There's a question right here. We'll go here. The question is that this is an important American story with a small part in Canada. How do you feel about presenting it first in Canada?
Well, we came to feel this is a very emotional journey, and we came to have an emotional relationship with Canada in this story. It's freedom, and there was a time in the movie and in history where all you had to do was cross the line into a free state. But after the Fugitive Slave Act, you had to go all the way across Niagara Falls and into Canada. And I don't know, it feels like, it feels good. It feels like, we brought Harriet to freedom. It's amazing. I have my own relationship with Toronto, and I've shot here this summer for the third time, and it's great to be here. And 22 years ago, I showed my first film at TIFF, and now I'm back. So I have a personal, emotional relationship. Look,
All right.
You guys have your own complicated history.
We do.
So I'm not going to let Canada off easy, But it's a very big part of the fugitive slave story, and so yeah, it's great. It's great to be here with this.
Okay, thank you. Let's go right here. The question is, you mentioned that this is only a part of Harriet's story. Do you have future plans to do more?
I would love to.
Financiers out in the audience? All right, yes? The question is, she noticed that instead of scenes of gory violence in the film, you were dealing with emotion and using, you said biblical songs? Yeah, dramatic songs as a way to generate that emotion instead. And she wondered if that was a choice to maybe not show as much of the violence.
Well, to us, we always think of this not as a slavery movie, but as a freedom movie. So this is really about, it's really about freedom and the choice to fight for freedom and the choice to be willing to die for freedom and the choice to bring other people to freedom. Obviously, slavery has to, slavery is where it came from. We have to understand it, and it's very complicated. What really was important to me, honestly, because we've seen the tropes of slavery, and obviously that's real and important. But what was kind of important to me in this story was this is northern, this is Maryland. And it was very complicated. It really was important to me that you understand that free people lived next to slaves and married them. Enslaved people and free people, they kind of shared a society. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought the fact that Harriet and her family went and hired a lawyer to prove they should be free, that was amazing to me. That's something like you just don't think of that, but they did. Harriet actually, it's a little too complicated, the full story, but she worked at Thompson's. Brodus hired her out on the side, and she worked at Thompson's, and she saved little pennies and put it together and saved that money to hire that lawyer to find the will of Brodus's great grandfather, who said that her mother should be freed at 45. It's really an incredible story, and so those kinds of things, the fact that there were Black mercenaries and Black sailors, and that the Underground Railroad was complicated. Those things were very important. So so I was trying to bring the other colors in that we haven't seen as much.
That complexity is a really key part of the film. One of my favorite scenes is when Harriet first arrives in Philadelphia and she meets the character played by Janelle Monáe, who's born free, and she tries to teach her how to carry herself as someone who owns freedom. And it's such a powerful relationship between those two women who've had such different experiences. We can do maybe one or two more questions. Is there anyone in the balcony with a question? Yes, I see someone here. Question is do you find it easier to play someone who has a real life character who's already existed rather than a fictional character?
I don't think so. I think that the lucky thing about a person who's already existed is that there's information about this person. You can look into this person, find out about what they were, what their wants were, what they looked like, so that you can inform your own performance with that. Whereas with a character that doesn't exist, I guess that's sort of a full playground. They're playgrounds in different places, essentially. One has all the bricks and puzzle pieces that you need, and you have to put them together. The other thing has pencils and papers that you just have to draw and make up pictures yourself. And neither one is harder than the other. They're just different, and I enjoy both.
Okay, last question right here. Yes. What were the most challenging scenes to film, and what was it like to take yourself in and out of the characters, especially for the people who were playing villains?
One thing we've said, there weren't any kind of games played on set where we tried to kind of go off into a corner and stay in our zone too much. It was an incredibly supportive environment and a huge amount of trust between everyone, which you kind of needed to have permission to do those kind of scenes, and it just wouldn't have worked if it wasn't there.
I think what Kasi had spoken to earlier in saying, those kinds of scenes, there is a collaboration and a trust that has to happen. And we spent a good bit of time, even for example, on the scene where I have to slap Rachel, like to be able to have that trust between each other, to say we are going to surrender completely and emotionally to go as far as we can in this moment without actually doing it, but we're going to make it look like we did it. But I mean, like this is the craft, you know what I'm saying? That like all of those pieces are in there.
Thank you. We are going to have to end it there, unfortunately. So I'll just ask you to please join me in thanking once again Cynthia Erivo, Leslie Odom Jr., Joe Alwyn, Jennifer Nettles, Hunter Hall, Von D. Curtis Hall, and director Kasi Lemmons.
Thank you, guys.